staying home tonight, far away from the bustle and the bright city lights. Let them all fade away, just leave us alone, and we'll live in a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows we'll leave far behind us there, and I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own. Oh my love, I cried for you so much, lonely nights without sleeping while I long for your touch. Now your lips can erase the heartache I've known. Come with me to a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows will leave far behind us there, and I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows will leave far behind us there, and I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own. And I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on Night Dreams with Gary Anderson do not necessarily reflect those of the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, its hosts, staff, or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, good evening, good morning, wherever you're at, and welcome to the show. Tonight, we're going to be diving deep into, well, the unknown. Atlantis. Was Atlantis real, or was it a fable? We'll find that out in a few minutes with our great guest tonight, Greg Little, and we're going to be talking about Atlantis. JC, what have you been up to?
Oh, I've been up to about 5'10".
Well, you need to grow, because you know 5'10" is short nowadays.
I've lost an inch, somewhere along an inch and a half. I think gravity it makes you shrink or something. It's weird.
Well, no, it's not that. It's called getting older. You shrink.
Yeah,
your joints all compress.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's going to be 80 degrees tomorrow. Looking forward to the weekend. Maybe I'm going to get out and start, hey, listen, you know how I always catch a big bass every year. It's about that time.
Well, aren't you going to go out and cut your grass?
Yeah, it is due for that too. Either that or buy a goat.
Don't even mention goats, but I tell you what, it eats everything.
Yeah, that's right. They even eat the trash that's in the garbage or in the yard.
Not the one we have.
No, yours is
It's very expensive. It will only eat the top. Whatever the horses eat, it eats. It thinks it's a horse.
Yeah, but it seems like I've seen his picture in a pentagram or something.
Probably. But you know what's really bad is the horses think they're a goat.
And the goat thinks it's a horse.
Yeah, of course.
You got a pretty screwy farm going on there, don't you?
Oh, we do. You know, I'm going to grow tomatoes this year.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to be buying me a nice old big plant, some beefsteaks here next week or so.
Or something. Well, you know, it's really going to be a great show here tonight. But before we have our guests on, you know what? We got Guy Ticker with the news. So, Guy, take it away.
This is NDTR Breaking News. We interrupt this program to bring you breaking news from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom. I'm Guy Ticker. This just in. A well-known cryptologist has just made a shocking claim that could rewrite everything we know about the elusive Bigfoot. Dr. Elias Morgan, a leading expert in cryptozoology and interdimensional theory, has revealed startling new evidence suggesting that these creatures are not just protectors of the forest. They are the forest. According to Morgan, Bigfoot are not simply physical beings, but manifestations of the wilderness itself, absorbing those who stray too far into their domain. Allow me now to present to you some direct quotes. I have them right here. Bigfoot isn't just a guardian of the woods. It is the spirit of the woods, Morgan explained. He went on to say, witnesses who disappear without a trace may not be victims in the traditional sense. Instead, they become part of the protector. Their essence, their very being, is absorbed into the energy of the forest. Close quote. Morgan's research suggests that these interdimensional entities have existed for centuries, sustaining their connection to the natural world by assimilating lost wanderers, lone hikers, and those who dare to disturb the balance of the wild. Strange disappearances in national parks, unexplained electromagnetic disturbances, and eerie feelings of being watched all point to something far more supernatural than previously thought. One chilling account from a survivor, and this also just came in, describes an overwhelming sense of being pulled into the woods by an unseen force. Quote, "I felt like something was calling me," the witness said. The witness went on to say he saw shadows moving with tall figures with glowing eyes. The air was heavy, and then he blacked out. When he woke up, he was back at his campsite, but the forest, it felt different, like it was alive and watching him. This reporter wants to know, could it be that those who disappear don't simply vanish, but instead become one with the ancient entity we call Bigfoot? Is the legend of Sasquatch actually a terrifying tale of spiritual transformation? According to Dr. Morgan, in this news report that just came in, he insists we must rethink everything we believe about the legendary creature. He says, and I'm quoting him here, "We're not just dealing with an undiscovered species." He warned, "We're dealing with something that transcends reality itself." Close quote. Is Bigfoot a simple creature of the wild, or is it an ancient force forever growing stronger as it claims those who dare to enter its realm? I'm Guy Ticker in the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom with this breaking news story. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling updates. We'll bring them to you as they develop. For now, we return you to your regularly scheduled program. This has been Breaking News on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Stay tuned to your local station for further updates.
You know, JC, I still think Bigfoot is a clan of my ex-mother-in-law.
Yeah, they forgot to shave once in a while, didn't they?
Quite often, actually. Anyway, let's find out a little bit of information about our guest tonight, shall we?
Yes, do it.
Dr. Greg Little has a master's degree in psychology and a doctorate in counseling and educational psychology from Memphis State University. Since the early 1980s, he's actively researched topics in archaeology and paranormal phenomena, especially focusing on America's mound builder culture. He's the author or co-author of over 70 books and workbooks and has been featured in 14 documentaries on the History Channel, Discovery, the Learning Channel, National Geographic, and other networks. His first book, entitled The Archetype Experience, came out in 1984, and it was a follow-up of Carl Jung's 1961 book on the UFO phenomenon. Today, Greg primarily writes about Native American mounds and spiritual practices. In 2009, he authored the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Native American Indian Mounds and Earthworks. Along with the UK's Andrew Collins, Dr. Greg Little is the co-author of the 2019 book Denisovan Origins and the 2022 book Origins of the Gods.
Well, welcome to the show, Greg. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just fine.
Well, from being, studying people's mind, going to, to Indian cultures and mounds to, Atlantis. Boy, you're a busy person.
Well, we were my wife and I did a great deal of exploration, and we've been quite busy. It's basically been my career since, for a long time, sort of a career anyway.
Atlantis, for all the years, off the Philippines, off of Japan, off of China, off of Nova Scotia, off of, Antarctica. It's so many people have their ideas where it could possibly be. And in the oceans, we do find, parts of civilizations that at one point existed. Could some of those all be, or could they all be Atlantis? Because could Atlantis been all over the world at one point?
Well, Plato, where the story came from, Plato talked about it as an island empire, and it certainly, from his description, seems like it was a maritime culture that did a great deal of trading everywhere in the world. So yes, and that's the conclusion that we reached back when we did the Search for Atlantis project, that it was a massive maritime culture that was basically everywhere, trading everywhere.
What really drew you into the mystery of Atlantis?
Well, really, I had no interest in it at all. I had read a lot of books on the paranormal about Atlantis. I never really, it just didn't interest me. But the truth is, it really started in 2001. Is when my real interest in it started. And it was at a conference where Andrew Collins, the British author, gave a presentation at a conference that I was also presenting at. And my wife and I were standing in the back, and Andrew showed two photographs taken from the air in 1968 by two pilots. And those pictures, one of them showed what looked like a triple ring of standing stones in relatively shallow water, and the other one showed what looked like the cursive letter E, just like that. Well, I have to draw it backwards because I think people see this backwards. There you go. It looked like the letter E underwater, and no one had ever been able to find those, and I was really interested in mounds at the time, and I was interested were there mounds in the Bahamas? Those two places, or those two formations, were near Andros Island in the Bahamas. And so we decided that we were going to go find those and discover exactly what they were. And that's how we started. And that was in 2001. And we did, of course, find them and discover what they were, but that led us down a rabbit hole. Because of what happened after it all. Both those formations, by the way, turned out to be natural. The giant, what looks like a triple ring of standing stones, is in extreme southwestern Andros Island. It's actually in Cuban airspace. We had to go into Cuban airspace to find it. So that's kind of the beginning to it all, and then it just took off from there. That's where we started our Atlantis search.
Do you think Atlantis really existed?
Well, I'm with Graham Hancock on this. I think there was he used the term advanced, which probably is the problem here. there was a maritime culture active at that time. Not much is known about it, and the reason is that the sea levels have risen so far since that time that whatever evidence of it exists underwater, under 100 to 300 feet of water. And it's pretty hard to really search in those areas. We did some searching in those areas, and we found a lot. But yeah, I think something really existed. Call it Atlantis, call it whatever you want, but Atlantis has become the A word in archaeology. Anybody except for skeptics who mentions it becomes a crackpot. You're derided, ridiculed, you're made fun of. But we found it very interesting in the search. We found a lot of stuff. None of it was from Atlantis per se, although it's possible there were a couple of things we found that really were from that time frame.
Interesting. Again, you were mentioning burial mounds and stuff. Like the UK, there's a lot of them going in there. I mean, they're still being found.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Mounds are found. New mounds are found every year. When the Smithsonian did their survey, the Mound Survey Project, in 1894, they estimated that they had found 100,000 mound sites in the eastern half of the United States alone, just in the eastern half. Now we know there are far more of that. They extend all across Alaska, all through all the Aleutian Islands. There are mounds made by Native Americans. And the oldest mound that I'm aware of anywhere in the Americas is in the United States. It is in southern Louisiana, dated to 9000 BC. There are quite a few in South America. The oldest one that I'm aware of, at least right now, dates to 8400 BC. But I'm sure there are older ones there too. They're found all the time.
And you really think about, how small this planet is, really. When you look at, everything from the Amazon to the UK to, Mexico and all around the world, okay? These things from pyramids to mounds, it makes you kind of wonder, how did they all created? We didn't have the internet. We didn't have books to sit there or telephones or any of that stuff. How could this all existed worldwide?
There was a worldwide culture that had shared beliefs. That's what it means. And so these shared beliefs had to get from one continent to another, and that's where this lost maritime culture comes in. I do believe that it did exist. It wasn't, people think they had spaceships, that they had submarines and planes and all that. No, I don't believe that. And I know Graham Hancock doesn't either. Graham has said repeatedly that he believes that they had reached the technology level that was around, say, in the 1700s, that they had sailing ships that were relatively safe. The other thing that most people don't know is during the Ice Age, from roughly 250,000 BC to about 10,000 BC, when the sea levels were lower, the temperature was colder, of course. It was the Ice Age. And weather is a lot more stable in cold weather. It's warm weather that causes instability. So it was somewhat easier for travel in times during the Ice Age across water. And I believe they existed.
I think, too, the continents might have connected, too, at one point.
Well, they probably did in many places, and we know the islands were far larger. During the Ice Age, there was a large island in the middle of the Atlantic. There was actually an island right outside of Gibraltar called Spartel. That's what it's called now. It was fairly large. The Bahamas were actually a huge island, because most of the Bahamas is relatively shallow. Florida was at least double the size that it is now. And we know from archaeological research that there are lots of underwater mound formations and geometric earthworks. I call them earthworks, but most of them would have been made out of sand and shell at that time. But those are underwater. They've actually found roughly 150 very promising sites using side scan sonar and sub-bottom profiling in the Gulf. I don't know whether to call it the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America.
I got a new name for it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the Gulf of Nebraska.
Well, I'm sure there is one somewhere.
Yeah.
No matter what you say, somebody attacks you on one side or the other. So right now, when I write about it, I put Gulf of America / Mexico. I don't know what else to do. I don't really want to offend anybody. I'm not trying to get into politics with it, but it is what it is.
Well, Mexico now, they're saying on their side,
Yeah.
you ready this? It's the Gulf of America.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It keeps. Who knows it could be, Greenland very shortly too.
Maybe.
But when you think about all this stuff and you go back in history and you go back to the Sphinx, you go back to like the Great Pyramids and all that, my feeling, and now that's just me as a talk show host, I really think that this planet has been rebooted once or twice.
Well, that's what Plato said. Plato's very story of Atlantis, which was in Timaeus, written around the year 355 BC, he said that this is an exact quote, there have been and there were and will be many and diverse destructions of mankind. But the truth of it lies in the occurrence of the shifting of the bodies of the heavens, which move round the earth, and a destruction of the things of the earth by fierce fire, which recurs at long intervals. So what Plato was really that's the end of the quote. What he was really telling us then is that things come from the sky and cause destruction. They can cause tsunamis. They can cause great fires, that's for sure. There is evidence of some of those. Of course, we all know about the dinosaurs, but there are the Carolina Bays, which are called the Carolina Bays because that's where they were first found. But it's a huge series of oblong-shaped, really they're all ponds and lakes now, that are pretty much from the Carolinas up north, and it looks like there was a meteorite strike or a comet strike that broke into a lot of pieces, and it's generally dated to around 10,000 BC. But of course, that's another controversy here. We do know also that the Native Americans had several destructions that occurred in the past that they talked about in their mythology. So call it Atlantis or whatever. Of course, all that's truly speculation. I was really interested to see what was there in the area where Edgar Cayce said that there were the halls of records, which he said the Atlanteans made, and also what other evidence might be there of some sort of a civilization in the Bahamas, where Cayce said somewhere in that area was their main island.
Very interesting. Well, your wife and you recently went to the Caribbean.
Well, we took 25 separate week to 10-day long trips into the Bahamas over a 10-year period. And during that time, we used side-scan sonar. We were working with an archaeologist from California, working under an archaeological permit. We actually found some things that are now official archaeological sites, and they're now off limits, which is bizarre. The moment you find something and you report it and they accept it as a real archaeological site, it becomes off limits. We did find a couple of those kinds of sites. One of them does look like a large collapsed stone building. We had the stone from it tested at 2 major universities and a private lab. They all found the same thing. The structure, it had fluted columns there, and it also had these giant beams, and it had these giant slabs of polished stone. It's all made from schist. That is spelled schist. And the schist came from one of 2 places, and all the labs concurred in that. It either came from Greece, and it's the same kind of schist that the Oracle of Delphi was made out of, or it came from Norway, which is odd, but it came from one of those 2 places. So there are structures there. These are not close to Bimini. Well, they're about 40 miles away from Bimini, but they're also closer to Andros. They're along North Andros. And those, one of them was definitely accepted as an archaeological site, and we have been to that numerous times. And again, all the geologists said it's the same thing. A lot of them wanted to go to it also when we found it, and they got to examine it.
Very interesting. Now, up on YouTube, I got a picture of you with it looks like a bunch of pillars that you sent over to my producer. I got it uploaded. And where was that at?
Well, I can't see it, so let me try to see the thing. I'm not sure which one it is.
It looks like
Is there a lot of stone?
Yeah, long stones.
Yes. Okay. So if this is what I think it is, okay, that is we call that Brown's Ruins, because it was first found by Esley and Krista Brown, who were very excited when they found it. They called us. That is now an official archaeological site. That is actually this massive pile of schist, and in that there are fluted columns. I think I posted 3 or 4 different photos from that exact site. Some of these are massive. They're very, very large. And what it looks like is that there was a structure built there and that a tsunami hit it and knocked it over. That is actually right at the 20-foot deep level. And on both sides of it, it goes to deep water very quickly. So it's very hard to dive. During tidal changes, when the tide goes in and the tide goes out, it changes. The water just flows through almost like a river and across this thing. Like I say, the area around it is very deep. We found that in the late 1800s, I believe it was 1898, a ship hit the thing. They thought they were in deep water, and a wooden ship hit it. The ship caught on fire. They got on little rowboats that they had, and they wound up going south when they eventually got to Cat Island. There were newspaper articles about it. They eventually went to Nassau, and a crew from Nassau came over, and they salvaged what was left of the ship. In fact, this is not that one, this one, this spike is from that ship that hit it. So we accumulated some spikes from the ship. This spike is from another ship that we found, and this came from a Spanish galleon. And how we knew it's a Spanish galleon, we got several of these, and when you cut them in half, they look like gold in the inside, but they're not gold. We had it analyzed, and it had about 1% gold, 2% silver. And when the Spanish made their galleons in Cuba, and they melted down all the gold and silver that they pillaged from South America and from Mexico, they used the same cauldrons where they put the gold and silver in to make these spikes out of, these iron spikes. And so that's how we know about 1 to 2% of gold and about 2% of silver in them. So that's how we know it was a galleon. But we found we found 2 that we believe are Spanish galleons. We didn't do any work there at all. We just simply pulled the spikes up, thought it was interesting, and that was it. But a lot of the wood still exists from the galleons, and wood only exists in that area of the Atlantic Ocean. That's the Atlantic, if it's covered in sand, because otherwise there's a worm called wood borers that literally destroy the wood, and the only thing left then, these spikes will be laying on the surface.
Now, all the times going back to the Bahamas and all that, a beautiful area, by the way, what's your feeling of all the places? Do you think that could have been part of Atlantis out there, or do you, or do you think it's not?
Well, here's where we wound up with this. We did find one thing that I'll get to in a minute that we think may very well be linked to that time frame, 10,000 BC. Otherwise, we found a whole lot of things that go back to about 3000 BC. And what those look like are breakwaters. They're gigantic stones that are piled atop each other, either U-shaped. Some of them are long and have like an L shape on them. One is at Andros Island on North Andros. Of course, the Bimini Road is the other. And the third one is at Cayce, which is an area that's about 30 miles from Cuba. We've been there. We were there with a crew with NBC when we went to Cayce, the main time we went there. And they all look very similar. Again, they're multi-levels of stones that are piled up, and they create a harbor area. So toward the end of this, the archaeologist we were working with, his name is Bill Donato. Bill did a side scan survey about 5 miles to the west of Bimini in what is deep water. The water there, where he was going up and down with the side scan sonar, is about 100 to 115 feet deep. Back in the early 2000s to late 1990s, Florida State University published articles showing the shorelines they had identified there. They showed the 10,000 BC shoreline, the 20,000 BC shoreline. They didn't get to the shoreline when the sea levels were 300 to 400 feet deeper. But we were right on the 10,000 BC shoreline. So when Bill Donato found this, we went down with him. We had our own side scan sonar on our own boat to refine them. And we also had a lot of underwater remote video we used. So we went up and down this formation. And when I call it a formation, here's what it is. So you have the shoreline with deep water toward the west. On the east, it starts going up a bit, upland. And again, this would have been the shoreline in 10,000 BC. In a 1.5 mile swoop along that, 1.5 miles, there are 3 rows, perfect rows, of square and rectangular forms. They're made out of stone. We dove with them with a History Channel crew with the show Mystery Quest. They actually showed some video of those formations on that episode with Mystery Quest. And there are blocks that almost in some cases, they're about like big cobblestones, but they look like big bricks. They're made out of that. And so you can see the outer walls and what are foundations of buildings, and it looks like the rest collapsed inside. So they're filled with sand, and they have a lot of growth in them. There's a lot of underwater growth in them. But there's over 50 of those buildings in these 3 lines that run along that 10,000 BC shoreline. So the conclusion that we reached was that...
We got to hold that to after the break.
Okay, no problem. We'll get there.
Okay, we'll be back with Greg in about 3.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. For more information about our guest tonight, go to our website at nightdreamstalkradio.com. We'll be back in a few.
We've been together for a long, long time. Time goes by so fast. Baby, it ain't been long enough to forget how it began. When I saw you walking down my street, didn't even know your name, but I got a feeling inside of me nothing's ever gonna be the same. Minutes, hours, years, and days, time goes by, but nothing's changed. I feel it that same way. 'Cause baby, I still love you like I used to way back in the day. Yeah.
Do you have a mother with a weird sense of humor? We have the perfect solution to your potential gift-giving conundrum. Buy for Mom this great read, The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook. It's the latest book by Robert Guffey, author of Cameleo. In the pages of the handbook, you will learn about the dangers of allowing your fetus an in utero internet connection, the growing problem of terrorism in the womb, and the little-known fact that Shakespeare created pregnancy, among other esoteric secrets. The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook is available directly from Madness Heart Press and Amazon.com.
No infants were harmed in the making of this handbook.
The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook by Robert Guffey. Order now. 2025, a year of false flags or impending contact. Do narratives hidden in the Bible and indigenous stories reveal what happened last time humanity was in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence? From international best-selling author Paul Wallace, The Eden Enigma and The Invasion of Eden. Archaeological sites, enigmatic carvings, and ancient texts reveal answers from the dawn of civilization. Harvard professor of astrophysics Avi Loeb says Paul Wallace provides a fascinating answer. Eric von Daniken says enlightening and persuasive. The Invasion of Eden and The Eden Enigma, available now on Amazon.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Coming to you from the great Northwest, this is Night Dreams. Now, here's your host, Gary Anderson, coming to you live from his secret compound.
Just waiting for that thunder to go by. Again, Atlantis, there's been so much talk, of maybe AT connection and alien connection or advanced civilization that could be so much more advanced than us. But again, here you were, and let's get back where we were just before we went to the break.
Talking about the 50 buildings. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we think that's where ships pulled up, loaded and unloaded cargo, and that it was a trading center. That's what we believe. And then at that time, Bimini was not a small island. It was connected to Grand Bahama Bank. It connected to the Little Bahama Bank, and it connected to Andros. So it was very, very large at the time. That's also the same thing that we believe the Andros platform was, and Cayce. Cayce was then a very large island too.
Now, do you think what happened to national, chain events where the islands just submerged?
Well, the sea levels went up really fast. Plato said it happened in a day and a night. Edgar Cayce said that it happened a little slower than that. It happened very quickly. But he said that there were Atlanteans on the mountaintops that witnessed the tsunamis coming in and so on and the destruction. But anyway, those are the stories. We don't really know anything other than Plato as far as ancient knowledge about it or stories about it. Plato did give us quite a bit of detail about it. Plato never talked about when it began. He didn't give any dates for that. Edgar Cayce said it began in 210,000 BC. But Plato said it started when the ancient gods were dividing up the world among themselves, and that Poseidon was given this area that we now call Atlantis, particularly the main island, and even gave us its dimensions. He said that it was 340 by 221 miles long. So 340 miles by 221 miles. He gave a lot of detail about the people that lived on the island at the time. They were basic human beings, but Poseidon was a god, and Poseidon took a wife. Her name was Cleito. They had 5 identical twins, all male. And those 5 identical twins went out and ruled different areas of the world. But again, he didn't give us a date when Poseidon did this. On this big island, and this is what everybody thinks is Atlantis. They think of the center city, that Atlantis was a great big, like a big circle or something that had these concentric rings and so on. Well, that was the center city of Atlantis. Plato said that it was on the southern part of the island, pretty much in the middle of the island. To the north, there were mountains. It had it was a tropical paradise. It had 2 growing seasons. There were canals on this giant plain, and on the plain, about 5 miles from the ocean, Poseidon made this area, this circular area that was a half mile in diameter. That was it. The center city was a half mile in diameter. And he put 3 concentric rings or canals around it. In the center, he built a gigantic mound, which was one of my real interests in this. And on top of that, he built this giant temple. And then between the rings, there was a racetrack. There were some houses that were built based on the 4 cardinal directions. There were these bridges that were built to the center of this, half-mile diameter circular city. That's the center city. It was surrounded to the north and the east and the west by this flat plain where things were grown. According to Plato, they had an army that had 100,000 chariots. He gave that number. He said there were elephants, cattle. He talked about them having shields and spears and thousands upon thousands of archers in their army. And the reason he mentioned that is because from this island empire, they went to the Mediterranean. They were trading in the Mediterranean, and they tried to conquer the Mediterranean. And it was their greed and their belief that they could do this that led to their destruction. And basically, that's how Plato ended his story, with the destruction of Atlantis. And he said, in a day and a night, Atlantis was inundated by water, and that it sank into relative shallow areas where ships really couldn't go anymore. And that was the end of his story. Somehow, Edgar Cayce, I believe, picked up on that one way or another. And that's why in Cayce's story, he talked about Atlantis being an empire beginning at the Straits of Gibraltar, going all across the Atlantic. And he said that if you started at Gibraltar and you hopped from island to island, you would reach the opposite continent. And he specifically mentioned the Gulf of Mexico, that there was a lot within the Gulf of Mexico. He mentioned Belize. Cayce said that at the end of Atlantis, he's the only person that I know of that ever said this. He said toward the end, the elite of Atlantis, most of them migrated to different areas, but the most elite migrated to the northeast of what we call the United States, and they became the Iroquois. And Cayce deliberately called them, in numerous readings, he said they were the red race. I don't know of any other, any of the people into Theosophy, any of the other early writers of Atlantis that talked about them being the red race. But that's who he said were the Atlanteans. And he said that the Native Americans built the mounds as replicas of their experiences in Atlantis. And also he mentioned the Gobi Desert. He said that some Atlanteans had been in the Gobi Desert. He also mentioned Egypt in this. The Atlanteans did not really go to Egypt till about 10,500 BC, according to Cayce. And that's when they decided, well, that was where they put one of the 3 Hall of Records in an underground chamber that is accessed by tunnels under the right paw of the Sphinx. And there's a Hall of Records there, according to Cayce. He didn't give the depth of it. Actually, Cayce people started drilling under the Sphinx in 1957. Most people don't know this. that some ARE members, and it was actually females, 2 females went to Egypt in 1957 and got permission to drill under the Sphinx. And that's where it started. That's where the search for the Hall of Records started, strangely enough. It's a story kind of lost in history because so much else has happened since then. But that was the first.
You know, regardless if they had advanced technology or not, they were a worldwide civilization.
I would agree with that. That was a maritime culture, went all over the place. I believe the weather was a lot better at that time, which I've already mentioned. As a former pilot, that's back in my private pilot. I did fly a lot. I actually started flying because I wanted to look for Indian mounds from the air. I was looking for lost mounds, and that's how I really began with it. And I also flew us down into the Bahamas as co-pilot in a 2-engine plane, very slow plane that we used to get GPS of formations that we found from the air. But cold air is very stable. The weather is not nearly as bad, and sailing is pretty easy in cold air. It's quite different when it's warmer. So yeah, I believe Atlantis was a maritime culture that pretty much traded everywhere around the world, and that is where all the legends come from.
But you know, when you really think about all these places where, you know, everybody's saying, well, Atlantis was here, Atlantis was there, you know, everything again from off of China, off of Japan, off of the Philippines, off Antarctica, they're finding weird things. You know, just recently there was like a road it was under that was, and then they started saying, well, maybe that was not created by man, maybe it was a natural thing. But when you really look at the image, it does look like, you know, bricks.
Yeah, there is stuff underwater virtually everywhere. During our search, we found a lot of modern stuff, including 31 planes. I've talked about that many times. 4 of those were Bermuda Triangle planes, which we identified from the things we pulled out of the planes. For example, this is one of the plates that we got. There are several others. We actually were in contact with a couple of the families of people who had lost people on planes, had lost relatives on them. But there's all kinds of stuff underwater. There's a lot of stone structures underwater along shorelines almost everywhere. The problem is it's very difficult for archaeology to look for it, incredibly costly. And from our experiences, it's really dangerous at times. The Bahamas can be really very, very dangerous to search at any time. The weather changes instantly. I have film of when we went to this one plane and investigated it. We anchored at it. I stayed on the boat while one of our Bahamians went down with a remote camera, which was hooked into a camera I had on the boat, and filming. And while I was on the boat, a storm just popped up out of nowhere, and I filmed 5 water spouts all in the same frame at the same time. And that storm literally came right over our boat while they were all underwater. It was incredibly violent, and it knocked out all of the electronics on the boat. We had a mothership, and then we had our own boat that we were towing. Our own boat was a catamaran that could go very fast and into shallow water. And that was on the second day that we were out. Just the second day. We were out for 10 days. So we had no air conditioning and no electricity on the boat. So that's one of the stories. The weather can be very, very bad. And while we were there, another time, a plane, we had just flown in and landed, and a call came in, and we were asked to go look for a plane that had just crashed into what's called the tongue of the ocean. And the pilot had flown right into a thunderstorm, which is not very smart to do. And we were asked to go look for the remains, which we were not able to do. So that kind of stuff happens all the time there. But yes, underwater, man, there's stuff like everywhere. India, The coastline of India has loads of it. In the Philippines, you're right. Yonaguni, which is around Japan, it's Okinawa. England, Doggerland, and everybody claims that it is Atlantis. And then off the coast of Africa, the coast of Spain has an incredible amount of stuff off of it. And I think all of that was related to this worldwide maritime culture that was active up until the sea levels rose around 10,000 BC.
Again, too, what happened to the remains of that culture? Could they have a spread all over the world?
Well, okay. So today, if you look at a modern map of the United States, a population map, you will see that the large bulk of our population, our 330 million people, I think it's like 70% of our population live along the coastlines. And imagine if all of a sudden sea levels jumped up by 100 feet. All of Florida would be underwater. All of New York, New Jersey, the Manhattan Island, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, all of those places, the entire sea level, New Orleans, Galveston, Texas, go 100 feet in. And I mean, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. The sea level of Memphis is 200, I believe it's 204 feet, where I used to take off on a private airstrip. I took off, and we always had to set our altimeter when we took off, and it was 204 feet. The sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, nearly 400 feet. So if they went up that far today, half of the United States would be underwater. Of course, all the mountains and the high plains area, that would all be above. The Alleghenies would be above, but half the country would be underwater. And that's what happened. The bulk of the population in the entire maritime culture lives along the coastlines. So it went under. That's where it went. And according to Plato, it happened quickly. And the only way that you can think about that, and based on what Plato said about the movements of the heavenly bodies, and that there were these destructions, that this happened really suddenly, and that there were some massive tsunamis that pretty much wiped out everybody and everything that was along the shorelines for hundreds of feet elevation, maybe even higher than that. And the only thing that would be left is stone. Everything else was destroyed except the stone structures. That's about it. So that's all that's really found underwater, even today.
Boy, you think someday in the future we can actually prove that this was Atlantis and not some other cultures?
I don't think mainstream American archaeology sees Atlantis as the A word. It's a curse word. So even calling it Atlantis, it's a lost maritime culture, gigantic culture. Do I think that ever? I think that they're beginning to see that, yes, there were other seafaring cultures that were in existence at the time. I don't think American archaeology will call it Atlantis in our lifetime or the lifetime of our offspring or probably their offspring. Maybe someday they'll call it the Atlantean culture or something. But that's not going to happen in our lifetime. Like I say, it's the A word. And even though I'm pretty well respected because of all the work that I've done in mounds and Native American mounds, as soon as anybody sees me getting in that, they say, "Oh, that's all nonsense. Why are you dealing with that?" And I'm dealing with it because, number one, it's interesting to look. The search is interesting. At the same time, I'm always looking for mounds and mound remains. And a lot of people don't know America's mounds are not all just heaps of earth. There were some that were made of stone. Some were covered in stone. All the stones were stolen and used by the call them settlers or whatever you want to call them, invaders that came into North America. There were stone chambers, and still are large, well-made stone chambers inside these mounds that are found all over the United States.
Well, I got to ask you a question, Greg.
Yeah.
The mounds that have been found in the United States, how similar are they to the ones found in the UK?
They're essentially the same. They're virtually identical. We have barrows, which is the UK term. I've been to the UK and been to many of them with Andrew Collins. I've taken Andrew Collins to a lot of them in the United States. They're identical. The stone chambers in England are very similar to the stone chambers you'll find in America's mounds. I'm not talking about the controversial ones that are in the northeast of the United States. I'm talking about mounds in Missouri and Tennessee and in Arkansas. They have stone chambers in them that look identical. There are mounds in America that are identical to barrows that have moats around them, deep moats with a single entrance into them. The largest one in the United States that has an inside moat has an outer earthwork wall. It's 30 acres, and it is identical to Avebury in England. It's the exact same size as Avebury in England, where we actually, we were there with Andrew. I won't say everything that we did at Avebury, but it's the same size. The difference is Avebury has all of the standing stones, but it's a 30-acre earthen enclosure that has an interior moat around it, not around it, on the inside. So it's not to keep people out. These are made to keep something in. That's a different thing. It's the same thing you find in England. The mounds in America are identical to those in England, but they're also found in Sweden. We've been to a lot of mound sites in Sweden, got a lot of pictures and information there. They're identical to the mounds in the United States, including the platform mounds. They have those in Sweden. There are mounds when the Ukraine war started. I started corresponding on X, or formerly Twitter, with an archaeologist in the Ukraine at the University of Kiev there. And he sent me information. I didn't realize that there are 50,000 mounds in Ukraine.
Wow.
That are identical to those in the United States. And every time I post photos of excavations of American mounds, he'll send me back photos of excavations in mounds in the Ukraine. The pottery that we find from American mounds is almost identical to the pottery you find there. But mounds are also found in France. They're found in Spain. They're everywhere over there.
But I got to ask you a really stupid question. Why would it be similar or the identical in the United States, Ukraine, UK, and all Germany and all these other countries, and let alone worldwide? I mean, again, there was no internet. There was no way to communicate. How could it have been done?
Shared cultural beliefs. People were traveling. They were sharing cultures. We know a lot more about what happened here in America. You know, a lot of people will look at artifacts, for example, from Mexico or the Aztecs or the Mayans, and they'll see artifacts from American mounds, and they'll say, wait a minute, that looks Mayan, or that looks like it's Olmec, or it looks Aztec. And up until recent years, archaeologists in the United States have said that there was no contact between the Mexican cultures and the extreme North American cultures, the mound builders. Now they know there was contact. There was a lot of contact. And one very well-known archaeologist in the Southwest who's he's very respected. He says, we need to assume that they knew everything about everybody and that these cultures interacted a lot, that there was trade. Columbus even saw these giant canoes that were faster than his sailing vessels that were in the Gulf and in the Caribbean when he came over. So they were probably going from Yucatan and they were going to Florida. There's a site in Florida called Crystal River. The staff at Crystal River and they even have a display there that shows this. They will tell you that the cultures in the Yucatan were interacting with Crystal River at the time, and that's in about central western coastal Florida is where Crystal River is. It's north of Tampa. So we know that there were interactions even at the time of Columbus going on, because he saw it. And now we know that there were interactions there. Whatever this shared culture was, now we know a lot about their beliefs. The same belief system is found in Siberia. It is well accepted and known that there were migrations from Siberian Asia into North America in around 9,600 to 10,000 BC. That was the main migration. It was the only one, according to archaeologists, in the 1980s and the 1990s till about 1997 or so. And now we know there were multiple migrations. We know in South America that there is a tribe that is genetically identical to Australians, the indigenous people of Australia and New Zealand. When they came over, we don't know. But it's likely they may actually have come over as early as 50,000 years ago.
And that, our time is up. We're going to have to get you for part 2. You know that. Yeah, all I can say is I think maybe they had technology more advanced than we can comprehend to been able to do all this. And that's the whole thing. Lost technology. We don't know, and we can't prove it or disprove it.
That's absolutely true.
Well,
that is true.
Again, do you have a website or anything you want to share, a book or anything?
The only thing, if you want to find me, you can just Google my name, Gregory L. Put my initial in, Gregory L. Little. Put that in, I'll pop up right away. If you just put in Greg Little, you'll find football players in the first page because there's a lot of them. But put in Gregory L. Little and you'll find me. I mainly interact on X or Twitter. And I try to answer everything. Anybody makes a comment and wants an answer, I'll usually answer it.
Well, hey, Greg, I want to thank you so much for taking your time and coming on tonight.
Thank you, Gary. Hey, it's been a pleasure. It was a quick hour, and it's been great.
And we'll have to get you on for an hour, too. You know that.
Okay. We'll do it again. Thank you.
Okay, my friend. Well, JC, who's our guest tomorrow? JC?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, our guest is going to be Mr. Paul Wallace.
And what are we going to be talking about with Paul Wallace?
Well, let me tell you something. He talks about an ET connection from way back to the beginning of time with civilizations.
Well, that's going to be really interesting tomorrow. So if you're into, cultures being tied into ETs, well, tomorrow, Paul Wallace is going to be on. We're going to talk about, again, if you think about maybe the planet being rebooted, maybe we've had help. Maybe we were a slave race that was brought here. I don't know. But there's so many questions, I have, and I've been asking for years. Just like the pyramids. Who created the pyramids? Again, Atlantis. Is it folklore or is it real? But if you really look at this, how could technology be the same all over the world? No internet, no phones, no TV, no books, no nothing. But yet, it's the similarities, from the UK to Ukraine to Mexico to America, South America, Siberia, all the same. That makes you wonder what this world had a connection more closer than I think we have now.
Yeah, I think we were, like he was touching on, certain cultures were way more trading and seaworthy and had more advanced boats and ships.
I think they were actually more advanced in a lot of ways. I really think we lost it at one point. Think about it. We can't duplicate the pyramids. We can't duplicate a lot of things. What happened to the Maya race? What happened to culture? What happened to this planet? And I really think at one point we were rebooted once, maybe twice, and maybe we're on the verge of being rebooted again.
Yeah, and also, if today disaster happened and culture stopped, in 4, 5, 6,000 years, 10,000 years, there'd be no signs of buildings or cars.
Oh, there'll be a lot of plastic in bottles. I guarantee that.
Right. Nature takes over, and that's what happens. So they could add something equivalent to cars and big high risers, but nature takes over.
Well, I'm going to jump out of here. I'm going to let our news guy read a letter, and then after the letter, we're going to be out till tomorrow. Again, please give us a thumbs up, and please give us, on the comment section. After the show's over, go on there and leave a comment about our guest, our show tonight, the topic, and what you think about the show. So let's do this with Guy Ticker, and then we'll catch you tomorrow on Night Dreams.
Hi, Gary. I'm a big fan of Night Dreams Talk Radio. I've been listening for a while now, and I've noticed that some people have shared stories with you through your website about encounters with UFOs or even abductions. Well, I've got one of my own. My name is Joyce Collars, and back in the early 2000s, something happened that my husband Dwayne and I will never forget. We were out camping near Mount Shasta. It was early spring. The skies were clear, and the campground was nearly empty. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, we were both jolted awake by this strange mechanical winding sound hovering above us. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't subtle either. At first, we thought it was a helicopter flying low over the forest, maybe part of a rescue or something. But the sound wasn't quite right. It wasn't a chopping or whirring sound. It was this vibrating hum, almost musical, but very unnatural. The tent was lit up like daylight. We scrambled outside, and when we looked up, we couldn't believe our eyes. There was a massive, bright, circular object, maybe 125 to 150 feet wide, just hovering silently above us. It had flashing lights of every color, red, blue, green, even a soft amber, and the air around it felt charged, like just before a thunderstorm, but heavier. We stood there frozen. It hovered in complete silence for what felt like 3 to 5 minutes, and then, bam, it was gone. It didn't fly off like a normal aircraft. It just shot out of view, straight up like a streak of light. No sound, just gone. Twain and I didn't say a word for a long time. Eventually, we crawled back into the tent, not knowing what else to do. We didn't sleep much after that, and honestly, we've told very few people over the years, not because we weren't sure of what we saw, but because we didn't want anyone thinking we were crazy. But your show gives people like us a place to share, so I wanted to thank you for that, Gary. Keep doing what you do. We're loyal listeners, and we'll keep tuning in. Just know there's something going on out there. And that night near Mount Shasta, we were under it. Joyce Collars, somewhere in Oregon. To which we added this response. Thank you, Joyce, for sharing that with us. We added a photo to give the viewers an idea of what you saw. Keep listening, and thanks again. Gary. Have you had an encounter? Well, tell us about it at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night.